What's up guys, welcome to AnimeKouhai. If you want to help me out, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel.
I was honestly concerned. On the other hand, it'd be nice to get a sample of how a lone adventurer would fare in the labyrinth. We might as well make him the fourth party today. Now that we had our challengers, the long-awaited moment was here. It was time to open the dungeon. There wasn't much time to work with, so all four parties would be going in at once. Soka would stay here to commentate on the on-screen action. Inside guidance would be best handled by the dryads, who'd also serve as cameramen as they accompanied each party. We didn't have many of them, but there were a few, Trainee, Treya, and Dorith included. The others were young and inexperienced in battle but boasted tremendous magical force. Under Ramirez's management, they'd make for perfect labyrinth managers.
These four people,
Soka said,
are the curators of our labyrinth. Normally they will not accompany parties entering the dungeon, but for today's run, we'll have one shadowing each team.
The quartet gave their hellos to the crowd. These were named Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta. Not having names would be inconvenient, so I just pulled those out of my head. It didn't cost me any magicules. Since dryads are high-level monsters, I could have them consume their own magic force for the job. Ramirez was their boss, so all I did was help come up with their names. As sisters, they all had the same looks, so telling them apart via visuals alone was a challenge. Monsters often rely on things like magical waveforms to identify individuals, but I thought that was asking a lot of humans, so names were more helpful.
If you guys run into any trouble, feel free to ask them for advice. And now, let me run down the rules for you all. First, I'm going to give these to everyone.
Soka pulled out a couple of items, Alpha and the other dryads giving the same ones to each party.
These items here, you see, we're planning to offer for sale when people enter the labyrinth. Does everybody have them now?
As she spoke, each item was shown in a close-up on the screen. This pseudo-television technology was really helpful for stuff like this. Currently, it was showing a set of 10 high potions, 1 full potion, and a bunch of resurrection bracelets and return whistles. These had been provided for free during today's beta test. If they were kind enough to volunteer, I didn't mind giving them some compensation. The dryad chaperones would have some backup items too, just in case, so they could get whisked to safety if things went south. Given the size of this thing, it was entirely possible that a party wouldn't get out of floor 1 in the time allotted. Even if they took the shortest path to the stairway down, we're talking a literal mile or so of walking, and given that this was a maze, they were gonna be covering much more distance than that. For the next 3 hours, it'd be best if the parties tried just hard enough to keep the audience entertained, and once time expired, they'd use their items to get back up top. I had other rewards for them, too, of course. For advertising purposes, I had some treasure chests set up containing souvenirs in the form of decent armor and so on. During actual operation, these chests wouldn't show up until floor 2 onward, but we were being generous today. Finally, Soka explained the most important item in the lot.
Now, take a look at this item. This is known as a resurrection bracelet, and we highly recommend you purchase this when you enter our labyrinth. What does it do? Believe it or not, it resurrects you from the dead.
The crowd immediately began chattering about this.
Impossible!
I could hear a few of them shout.
Ladies and gentlemen, quiet, please. This is important, so I want to be sure everybody's paying attention, alright? The key thing here is that this item only works if you are inside Tempest's dungeon. It doesn't do anything at all outside the labyrinth, and given the stakes involved, we want to be absolutely sure everyone's aware of that. Always remember that at all times, this doesn't work outside.
That was important. If someone assumed otherwise, it'd make for some sad scenes if they tried using it and failed. I didn't want people to claim I was liable. It's up to you to keep yourself safe, okay, guys? But I knew that some people just loved to cause a scene and complain about anything and everything, so we needed to be 100% sure we drilled this point into everyone's minds. Nobody could be allowed to think this worked outside the labyrinth. We couldn't have some idiot think, hey, maybe it'll work somehow. If you mess that up, hey, it's not our fault. The promoter, i.e., me, bore no responsibility. You know, in my old world, I always felt like people foisted way too much responsibility on retailers and companies. If some fool breaks the rules, goes crazy, and gets themselves killed, all I can say is that they had it coming, but if we're negligent about providing guidance and cautions, then it does become our fault. That's why we needed to be thorough about our warnings here.
So once again, never, ever attempt to use this bracelet outside.
Soka was being exactly as clear and thorough as I hoped. Good. The only unresolved item on my wish list was to have someone actually die in there, something people would admittedly be reluctant about. But Ramirez had upgraded the resurrection bracelets to the point that they even cancelled out pain upon determining you were dead. They also gave you a delay of around 10 seconds between when you died and when you got teleported back up, so if you or a fellow party member could take suitable measures in time, you could still get fixed up on the spot. Resurrection, being a divine skill and everything, was too high level for most people to cast, but still. By the way, full potions normally cannot regenerate the soul, but since your soul was stuck firmly inside your own body inside the labyrinth, you actually could resurrect people with a full potion to restore the body. I feared encouraging this, however, since, again, it may give people the idea they could pull that trick outside as well. That's why, unless you resurrected a downed adventurer the standard way, their body and soul would get teleported topside after 10 seconds. Just like Masayuki, one should just think of it like a dungeon exploration video game. Anyway, that wrapped up the initial briefing. Now I just needed someone to try out the resurrection bracelet for me.
So who would like to experience this for themselves?
I doubted anyone would, actually, but Soka brightly belted out the question anyway. Talk about thick-skinned. Basone, the giant skinhead of a man, grunted at this.
You'll never die in the labyrinth? That's a funny joke. If you think I'm gonna believe that and get myself killed in there, you got another thing coming.
The people around him nodded their assent. This was just common sense. Not even Ellen's team was taking the bait.
Well, who do you think should do it? You go first.
Gaia the flowing swordsman pointed a finger at Mjolmile. He wanted someone else to go first, not him, and I guess that was to be expected. I wished he were more polite about it, though.
Me? An understandable suggestion, I suppose. I'd be happy to.
Mjolmile, perhaps expecting this, wasn't agitated at all. In fact, he'd already experienced it once. The members of Team Reborn under Xian had experimented with it many times, so he fully believed it was safe, and going through it one time removed any fear from the process. So, with as much stately majesty as he could muster, he put on the bracelet and set foot inside the labyrinth. The challengers followed behind him.
Now, if you actually attack Mjolmile in here.
Soka took up the sword on her hip, preparing to slash at Mjolmile. But before she could continue, Gaia cut him off.
You can't trick me.
There was an arcing flash in the air, and then he sliced Mjolmile's arm clean off.
Hey!
Soka tried to stop him, but nowhere near in time. Mjolmile started shouting as well, bringing a hand to the gaping wound. The reduced pain effect kept him from dying of shock, but I'm sure getting forcibly amputated wasn't a very pleasant feeling.
And now it's almost time for the final blow.
Was he just playing with him? What a bastard. I almost lost my temper, but then I saw a smile on Mjolmile's face. That restored my cool, and just as it did, Gaia's sword hewed Mjolmile's head clean off. At once, his body turned into a collection of light particles, flowing up and gathering by the door at center stage. Mjolmile, along with what he was wearing, formed anew from these particles, fully restored. The crystal balls carried by Alpha and the other dryads recorded all of this, transmitting it to the large screen in the hall.
And there you have it. I'm back in perfect shape.
Mjolmile stood there, as if he hadn't just been brutally murdered. His severed arm was attached to him as well. It couldn't have been a better performance. The audience cheered for him. Some of them screamed that it was a miracle. I'd say the demonstration was a success. I didn't want people to think this was an elaborate trick, but thanks to Gaia's penchant for sudden violence, I think everyone was more convinced than they would have been otherwise. If anyone still didn't believe it, we'd just have to let them experience it for themselves. Of course, it wasn't risk-free, so the best thing to do in the labyrinth was to simply not die. Take care of yourself down there, and you'll never have to go through it. I figured we could let adventurers who challenged the labyrinth spread the stories for us, and things would work themselves out. I thought some curious daredevils would want to get killed just to see what the experience was like, and that was no problem to me, either. The important thing was that adventurers had nothing to fear if they took on the dungeon, and I thought Mjolmile had just ensured that for me. I gotta say, he's got courage. He put up with Gaia's morbid antics because this is exactly how he wanted this to turn out. Definitely need to thank him later for taking that role, I thought as I looked at the screen.
The dungeon is now open for exploration. A brand new world is waiting for you inside. What could be awaiting those intrepid enough to battle their way through to the bottom?
Soko was on stage, kicking off her commentary, as the screen showed the viewpoints of all 4 parties. The live connections worked without a hitch, bringing the audience inside the labyrinth. She was taking a documentary-style approach to her announcing, and I really appreciated her attention to detail as I watched the party set off. The first one that caught my eye was Bisson's, as they plunged past the orderly, well-built stone-type walls that defined floor 1. I figured at least one party member would be drawing a map on the way, but nobody was. They weren't even leaving marks on the walls to keep their bearings, instead just pleasantly chatting as they strode down the corridors. Were they gonna be okay? I knew people like them explored caves and went on hunting missions in lush forests and so on. How did this party find its way to their destination otherwise? They didn't hire a guide every time, did they?
It's the same damn kind of corridor over and over, and all these crossroads.
Weren't we at this intersection before, boss?
Just as I feared, they were lost. I'd told them earlier how big this place was, but had they tuned that out?
Whoa, this is bad news, boss-son. This maze is bigger than I thought.
Ah, yeah, the first floor alone was over 800 feet long per side. They had been told this was a pretty big place, but I suppose they were picturing something cozier. I guess that, if you heard it described as a man-made structure beneath the Colosseum, you'd likely think it wasn't that big, either. But oh well, it wasn't my problem, and again, it made for good advertising. However, I really didn't want these parties to face instant death at the start of floor 1. If we went that insanely hard on them from the get-go, nobody would want to take the challenge. They needed to get at least a little far in. They could always die to be transported back, and there was an SOS feature in their bracelets as well, which treated the wearer as dead and let them escape at any time.
That's it for this video, guys. Thank you for always watching my videos and supporting my channel. Shoutout to the whole Subramanian, Nightgazer, Light Gaming, Centisaurus, Manikanth, Hexelus Lux, Skatosh Corner Store, Thero Letlape, Assassin139, and last but not least, shoutout to William Yancey. I'll see you guys in the next video.